Ethan's initial days on the Zenith Tower team were challenging. He was the new face in a group of seasoned professionals, many of whom had worked with each other for years. They were a close-knit team, and some were skeptical of the quiet newcomer who kept to himself. They saw his focus and, well, mistook it for aloofness. He would offer suggestions in meetings, his voice soft but his logic sound, only to be overlooked in favour of louder, more assertive opinions. The shadow of Mr. Finch's insult lingered, making him hesitant to push his ideas too forcefully. He knew he had to earn their trust, not demand it. He decided to let his work do the talking. He did not engage in office politics or loud debates. Instead, he delivered flawless work, always on time, and often with improvements that no one had considered. When a colleague was struggling with a complex calculation for wind resistance, Ethan stayed late, not to show off, but to help. He quietly sketched out a solution on a spare piece of paper and left it on the colleague's desk. The next morning, the colleague looked at him with a newfound respect. Small acts of quiet competence began to build bridges. Slowly but surely, his reputation on the team began to change. People started to notice the quality and precision of his contributions. The project manager, a stern but fair woman named Sarah, began to rely on his analysis. She saw that beneath his quiet exterior was a brilliant architectural mind. She started calling on him in meetings, making sure his voice was heard. "Ethan, what are your thoughts on this?" she would ask, and the room would quiet down to listen. His ideas were always well-reasoned, practical and innovative. He was no longer the invisible man. He was becoming a valued member of the team. Ethan started to feel a sense of belonging he had not felt before. The respect he was earning was not based on a famous name or a charismatic personality. It was built on the solid foundation of his skill and his dedication. He was proving to himself more than anyone else that his work had merit. He was still quiet, still humble, but a new confidence was growing within him. He was part of something big, and he was making a real difference. The memory of the humiliation at the Gala was still there, but it was no longer a source of pain. It was a motivator, a reminder of why he was here. The Zenith Tower was rising steadily, a magnificent skeleton of steel and glass reaching for the sky. The project was on schedule, and honestly, a sense of pride and excitement filled the air. Mr. Finch made frequent visits to the site, his presence casting a long shadow of authority and expectation. He would stride through the offices, offering curt nods to the senior architects and, well, ignoring the junior members of the team like Ethan. Ethan kept his distance, focusing on his work, his moment of confrontation still a distant thought. His primary focus was ensuring the structural integrity of the building he was helping to create. One late night, as Ethan was conducting a final review of the integrated blueprints, a task no one else wanted because of its sheer complexity, he noticed something. It was a tiny discrepancy, a minuscule misalignment between the plans for the upper-level steel framework and the foundation's load-bearing specifications. It was the kind of error that could easily be missed, a digital ghost in the machine of 1,000 drawings. Anyone else might have dismissed it as a simple rounding error, a trivial detail that would sort itself out. But Ethan's mind was trained to see the importance of the smallest details. He double-checked the calculations, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. Then he checked them again. The error was real. On its own it was small. But as he ran simulations, he saw the terrifying truth. As the tower grew taller, the small error would be magnified, creating a critical stress point in the structure. Under certain conditions, like high winds or a minor seismic event, this unseen flaw could lead to a catastrophic failure. The magnificent Zenith Tower, Mr. Finch's monument to his own ego, was being built on a potentially fatal mistake. The crown jewel of the city could become its greatest disaster. A wave of cold dread washed over him. He had to tell someone, but who would believe him? He was still a relatively junior member of the team. Accusing the lead architects of such a massive oversight was a dangerous move. It could be seen as an act of arrogance or an attempt to sabotage the project. He could lose his job, his reputation, and any chance of a future in this industry. For a moment he considered staying quiet, telling himself it probably wasn't as bad as it seemed. But then he pictured the finished tower, filled with people, and he knew he could not live with himself if he did nothing. With his heart pounding in his chest, Ethan gathered his calculations and simulations. He knew he could not go to his immediate superiors. They had already signed off on the plans and would be defensive. He had to go straight to the top of the project team. He requested an urgent meeting with Sarah, the project manager, and the lead structural engineer. He walked into the meeting room, the same room where he had once been hesitant to speak, and laid his findings on the table. He explained the flaw calmly and logically, without accusation or drama, walking them through his discoveries step by step. The initial reaction was one of disbelief and skepticism. The lead engineer was immediately defensive. "That's impossible," he scoffed. "Our team has reviewed these plans 100 times. You must have made a mistake in your own calculations." The pressure in the room was immense. Ethan's career hung in the balance, but this time he did not shrink. He stood his ground, his voice steady. "With all due respect, sir, I have checked my work more than a dozen times. I urge you to run the simulations yourself. The safety of this building and everyone in it is at stake." Sarah, who had come to trust Ethan's meticulous nature, looked at him and then at the lead engineer. "Let's run the simulations," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The team gathered around the main computer as the complex simulations were run again, this time using the parameters Ethan had identified. The room was silent, the only sound the quiet hum of the machine. Then the results appeared on the screen. A new structural stress map glowed with an alarming shade of red, right where Ethan had predicted the failure point would be. A collective gasp went through the room. Ethan was right. He had found a critical, potentially disastrous flaw that everyone else had missed. The lead engineer stared at the screen, his face pale. He looked at Ethan no longer with skepticism, but with awe. News of the near disaster and Ethan's discovery travelled fast. The project was halted immediately. Alistair Finch was furious when he heard, storming into the office and demanding to know who was responsible for the delay. He was directed to the conference room, where Sarah was meeting with Ethan and the senior team to work on a solution. Mr. Finch burst into the room, his face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared. "Who is this person who claims my tower is flawed?" Sarah stood up. "This is Ethan, Mr. Finch," she said calmly, "and he didn't just find a flaw, he saved your project." Alistair Finch stared at Ethan, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. He vaguely recognized the quiet man standing before him. "You," he began, the memory of the Gala slowly returning to him. He remembered his cruel words, his dismissive gesture, and now this same man, the one he had told to stick to designing garden sheds, was the one being credited with saving his legacy. The irony was not lost on him. The room was tense as everyone waited to see how the powerful executive would react. For a long moment, Mr. Finch was silent, his gaze fixed on Ethan. Ethan met his gaze, not with anger or triumph, but with a quiet, steady confidence. He had no need for revenge. His work had spoken for him, louder and more eloquently than any words could. He presented the solution he had already been working on, a series of structural reinforcements that could be integrated into the existing framework without a major demolition. His explanation was clear, brilliant, and efficient. He was not just the man who found the problem, he was the man who had the solution. He was an architect in the truest sense of the word, a builder, a problem solver. As Mr. Finch listened, he saw not the insignificant man from the party, but a professional of immense talent and integrity. He saw the passion and intelligence in Ethan's eyes, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a look of genuine respect. When Ethan finished, Mr. Finch did something that no one on his team had ever seen him do before. He walked over to Ethan and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. "You were right. I was wrong. Not just about the tower, but about you." A few weeks later, at a press conference announcing the revised schedule for the Zenith Tower, Mr. Finch stood at the podium. Instead of taking all the credit, he called Ethan to the stage. In front of the entire city's media, he publicly acknowledged Ethan's crucial contribution. "We build these towers with steel and glass," Mr. Finch announced, "but their true foundation is the integrity and brilliance of people like Ethan. He is a testament to the fact that talent does not need to be loud to be powerful. He saved this project, and I am deeply grateful." The applause that followed was for Ethan, and it was warm and genuine. Standing on the stage, with cameras flashing and people applauding, Ethan did not feel a sense of revenge. He did not feel the need to look at Mr. Finch with an "I told you so" expression. Instead, he felt a deep, quiet sense of pride. It was not the pride of having beaten someone, but the pride of having been true to himself. He had faced humiliation and doubt, but he had not let it break him. He had channeled his hurt into hard work, and he had let his skills prove his worth. He realized that the respect he had been given was simply a reflection of the respect he had finally found for himself. He returned to his work on the Zenith Tower, no longer a junior member in the shadows, but a lead consultant on the project's most critical aspects. His colleagues now sought his opinion, and his voice was one of the most respected in the room. He remained the same quiet, thoughtful person he had always been. But now his quietness was seen not as weakness, but as a sign of his deep concentration and wisdom. He had not changed who he was to fit into the world. He had made the world see the value in who he was. He was still Ethan, the man who loved lines and light. The Zenith Tower was eventually completed, a shining masterpiece on the city skyline. It was beautiful and strong, a symbol of ambition and innovation. But for Ethan, the tower was more than just a building. It was a reminder of his own journey. It represented his ability to overcome adversity, to find strength in his own abilities, and to earn respect through integrity. Every time he looked at it, he felt a connection to it, not just as its architect, but as someone whose own story was built into its very foundation. It was a monument to his resilience. In the end, Ethan learned a valuable lesson. True strength and respect do not come from putting others down or from having the loudest voice. They come from within. They are built slowly and carefully through dedication, hard work, and an unwavering belief in your own worth. The tallest and most important structure he had ever helped build was not the Zenith Tower. It was the quiet, unshakable confidence he had built within himself. And that was a structure that no one, no matter how powerful, could ever tear down.